The morning alarm on Vethar 7 had been broken for 8 months, but Commander Thane Korak's body knew the routine by heart. His eyes opened to the familiar sight of rust stains, spreading across the metal ceiling like abstract constellations, mapping out the slow decay of Outpost Meridian 4 at 67. His once powerful frame had been whittled down by radiation sickness, poor nutrition, and the weight of abandonment that pressed heavier on his chest with each passing day. The red dwarf sun cast its perpetual twilight glow through the cracked viewport. As Thane pulled himself from the narrow cot that had been his bed for the past 4 years, his joints protested with sharp pains that shot through his knees and shoulders, souvenirs from a dozen forgotten battles fought in the name of human expansion. He shuffled to the water recycler, checking the filtration levels with the mechanical precision of a man who had nothing but time and the desperate need to maintain routine. 3 years. It had been 3 years since his last communication from Earth Command. The message had been brief, clinical, mission parameters concluded, extraction postponed pending resource allocation, maintain position. He'd waited by the communications array for weeks, then months, sending daily status reports into the void. The silence that answered him was louder than any explosion he'd faced in combat. Thane moved through his morning inspection of the outpost's failing systems. Life support hummed at 60% efficiency. Food synthesizers could produce perhaps 2 more months of barely palatable nutrition paste. The backup generator flickered ominously, threatening to plunge him into the eternal darkness of space. He made the same notes in his digital log that he'd made yesterday and the day before, and every day since hope had quietly died in his chest through the main viewport. He could see the skeletal remains of the mining operation that had brought him here initially. What was supposed to be a 6-month security assignment protecting corporate interests had become his prison when political winds shifted and the mining rights were revoked. The company had fled, Earth Command had moved on to more pressing conflicts, and Commander Thane Korak, once decorated hero of the Proxima campaigns, had been filed away. Under acceptable losses, he settled into his observation chair, the same spot where he'd spent countless hours watching the empty sky. His weathered hands traced the faded insignia on his uniform jacket, the Golden Star, and twin comets that marked him as a deep space explorer, first class. Once that symbol had meant something. Once it had opened doors and earned salutes from junior officers who looked at him with admiration. Now it was just another piece of deteriorating fabric in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. The pain in his chest wasn't entirely physical anymore. Loneliness had become a living thing inside him, gnawing at his sanity with the persistence of cancer. He talked to himself now, holding conversations with holographic memories of his old crew, debating tactical decisions with ghosts who never argued back. As the alien sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Thane allowed himself the luxury of remembering better days, the victory celebration after the Battle of the Shattered Rings, the grateful faces of colonists he'd protected, the weight of medals that once hung proud on his chest. Those memories felt like stories from someone else's life now, faded photographs from a man who might have existed once upon a time. He closed his eyes and listened to the dying heartbeat of his outpost, wondering if tomorrow would be the day the life support finally gave out. Part of him hoped it would be. At least then, the waiting would finally be over, and Commander Thane Korak could rest at last among the stars he'd once called home. The sound came first, a low harmonic thrumming that made the outpost's walls vibrate in frequencies Thane had never heard before. His eyes snapped open from an afternoon doze, adrenaline flooding his system with the sharp clarity of a soldier who'd survived too many ambushes to ignore unusual sounds. The thrumming grew stronger, accompanied by a melodic resonance that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his bones. Through the cracked viewport, he saw it descending through Vethar 7's crimson atmosphere like a falling star made solid. The vessel was unlike anything in Earth's fleet, sleek and organic, its hull shifting between silver and deep blue like living metal. Intricate patterns of light danced along its surface in spirals that reminded him of DNA helixes or perhaps musical notation written in photons. Thane's hands shook as he reached for his sidearm, muscle memory overriding rational thought. After 4 years of isolation, his first visitors could be pirates, scavengers, or worse. The weapon felt heavy in his grip, unfamiliar after years of disuse. His heart hammered against his ribs as the ship settled onto the outpost's landing pad with impossible grace, its engines singing a complex harmony that made the air itself seem to shimmer. The boarding ramp extended with a soft pneumatic hiss, and Thane held his breath. What emerged from the soft blue light within made him question his sanity. She was tall, nearly 6 feet, with a dancer's fluid grace that made each step seem choreographed by angels. Her skin was the color of winter moonlight on still water, a pale blue that seemed to glow from within. Intricate silver markings traced delicate patterns along her arms and throat. Not tattoos, but something that seemed to flow beneath her skin like liquid starlight. Her hair cascaded in waves of deep red copper, shot through with strands that caught the light like spun gold. But it was her face that stopped his breath entirely. High cheekbones, framed eyes the color of deep ocean twilight, large and expressive, in a way that spoke of intelligence and compassion. Her features were alien yet hauntingly beautiful, as if evolution on distant worlds had arrived at a different definition of perfection. She wore ceremonial armor that looked like it had been forged from meteors and starlight, dark metal inlaid with patterns that matched the markings on her skin. A flowing cape of deep midnight blue trailed behind her, adorned with symbols that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. Thane raised his weapon with trembling hands, his voice cracking from disuse. "Stop right there. Identify yourself." The alien woman paused, her twilight eyes finding his through the viewport. Instead of fear or anger, her expression showed something that made his chest tighten with emotions he'd forgotten how to name or recognition, reverence. Joy so pure it seemed to illuminate her from within. She approached the outpost's entrance and spoke, her voice carrying that same melodic quality as her ship's engines. The words were imperfect, if accented, standard Terran. "Commander Thane Korik of the Deep Space Exploration Corps, hero of the Proxima campaigns, guardian of the Shattered Rings," each title fell from her lips like prayer. "I am Princess Vellani of the Kytherian Empire, daughter of the 5th Dynasty, seeker of the Lost Guardian." Thane's weapon clattered to the floor. Those words, guardian of the Shattered Rings, hadn't been spoken aloud in over 20 years. The Battle of the Shattered Rings had been a minor skirmish in the grand scheme of human expansion, barely a footnote in the war records. He'd defended a small convoy of refugee ships from raiders, nothing more. Vellani reached the sealed door and placed her palm against the metal. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion that transcended species barriers. "I have searched for you across 40 systems and 25 years of my life. My people have waited a generation to honor the debt we owe." She pressed her forehead against the door, and Thane could hear tears in her voice. "Guardian, I have found you at last, through the reinforced metal, through the years of abandonment and despair, through the vast emptiness that had consumed his soul." Princess Vellani's words reached him like sunlight breaking through a decades-long eclipse. "Please," she whispered, "let me come home to you." And for the first time and for years, Commander Thane Korik remembered what hope felt like. The airlock cycled with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and Princess Vellani stepped into Thane's world with the careful grace of someone entering a sacred shrine. Her ocean-deep eyes swept across the cramped, deteriorating space that had been his prison, taking in every detail with the focused attention of a scholar studying ancient texts. When her gaze finally settled on him, Thane felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the torn uniform hanging loose on his diminished frame. "Guardian," she breathed, approaching him with slow, reverent steps. "What have they done to you?" Before he could protest, her hands were on his face, fingers tracing the radiation scars along his jawline with infinite tenderness. Her touch was warm, electric, sending shivers through nerve endings that had forgotten anything beyond pain and loneliness. This close, he could see that her silver markings pulsed gently with her heartbeat, and her skin held a subtle luminescence that made her seem like a living constellation. I'm nobody special," Thane whispered, his voice hoarse from years of disuse. "Whatever you think I did, you saved my people," Vellani interrupted, her hands moving to his shoulders to steady him as his legs threatened to give out. The Battle of the Shattered Rings. Do you remember the refugee convoy? 17 ships carrying the last survivors of the Cytherian homeworld evacuation. Thane's mind struggled to focus through the fog of malnutrition and shock. There were raiders, slavers, I think. Standard patrol response. Those weren't just any refugees, Guardian. Those ships carried the last genetic diversity of our species, our children, our elders, our cultural archives. We were fleeing the burning of Kythera Prime, scattered to the winds with nowhere to go. Her voice trembled with the weight of memory. The slavers would have sold us piece by piece across the outer rim. Our civilization would have died in chains. She guided him to his cot, supporting his weight as if he were made of fragile crystal. From her ceremonial armor, she produced a small device that projected holographic images into the air between them. Thane watched in wonder as scenes unfolded of a rebuilt world, gleaming cities that seemed to grow organically from crystal formations, beings with Vellani's ethereal beauty moving through spaces that married technology with natural harmony. This is Kythera Secundus, she explained, her hand finding his and intertwining their fingers. Our new homeworld, built from the hope you gave us. Every building, every garden, every child born under our twin suns exists because one human warrior chose to stand between predators and prey. The hologram shifted to show massive monuments, crystalline structures that reached toward the sky, like frozen lightning. At their base, Thane saw his own face rendered in loving detail. Though idealized and younger than he remembered ever being, we built these in every city, the temples of the Guardian. For 25 years, children have learned your name before they learn their own family histories. Vellani's thumb traced circles on the back of his hand, the simple contact grounding him in a reality that felt too wonderful to be true. You are not forgotten, Thane Korok, you are legend. As she spoke, she began tending to his physical needs with the same reverence she'd shown his memory. From her ship, she brought medical supplies that worked like miracles, healing compounds that eased the radiation damage in his cells and nutrients that brought color back to his pallid skin. But more than the medicine, it was her presence that began to mend something deeper. They talked through the night cycles, her melodic voice weaving stories of how his single act of heroism had rippled across decades. She told him of the children, named in his honor, of the festivals celebrated on the anniversary of the battle, of the prayers offered to human courage in their temples. With each word, Thane felt pieces of himself, pieces he'd thought lost, forever clicking back into place. Why you? He asked during one of their quiet moments, as she carefully massaged feeling back into his atrophied muscles. Why did they send royalty to find one broken-down soldier? Vellani's hands stilled on his shoulders, and when she looked at him, her eyes held depths that spoke of destiny and dreams. Because according to our most sacred prophecies, the Guardian would not only save our past, he would shape our future. The one who found him would be blessed with a bond that transcends species and stars. She leaned closer, her breath warm. Against his ear as she whispered, I volunteered for this mission not just as a princess, but as a woman who has dreamed of you since childhood, who has seen your face in meditation and felt your soul calling across the void. When their lips met under the binary moons visible through the viewport, it wasn't just a kiss, it was recognition. Two souls, separated by species and circumstance, finding their way home to each other across the infinite dark of space. 3 weeks had passed since Vellani's arrival, and Outpost Meridian 4 had been transformed from a tomb into something resembling a home. Her ship's medical bay had become Thane's sanctuary, where alien healing technology worked miracles on his radiation-damaged body. But it was Vellani's touch that performed the deeper healing, her presence drawing him back from the brink of despair with the gravity of a loving star. The morning found them in the observation deck she'd constructed by merging her ship's hull with the outpost's main viewport. Crystalline walls now filtered the harsh light of Vethar 7's sun into something warm and golden, while bioluminescent vines from her homeworld provided a gentle secondary glow. The space felt alive in a way that spoke of Cytherian harmony with nature. Tell me about the bonding rituals, Thane said, his fingers tracing the silver patterns on Vellani's arm as she lay beside him on the bed. She'd installed a far cry from his narrow military cot. Her skin was warm silk beneath his touch, and he marveled at how the markings seemed to respond to his caress. Growing brighter under his fingertips, Villani's eyes fluttered closed, a soft sound of pleasure escaping her lips at his touch. Among my people, physical intimacy is sacred, a joining not just of bodies, but of minds and souls. When two beings are meant for each other, the connection transcends the boundaries of flesh. She rolled to face him fully, her ocean-deep eyes, holding his with an intensity that made his heart race. The first ritual is called the awakening, where partners share their deepest memories and desires without barriers. Her hands found his chest, palms flat against his heart. "May I show you?" At his nod, Villani began to hum that same melodic resonance he'd heard from her ship. The sound seemed to vibrate through his bones, and suddenly his mind was flooded with images that weren't his own. He saw Villani as a child, standing before the monuments built in his honor, her small hands pressed against the crystal as she whispered prayers to the guardian she dreamed of meeting. He felt her years of training, the discipline and dedication that had shaped her into the woman who now lay beside him. But deeper than memory was emotion, her love for him, that had grown across decades before they'd ever met, a soul-deep certainty that their destinies were intertwined. The intensity of it stole his breath and brought tears to his eyes. "Now you," she whispered, guiding his hands to rest on either side of her face. Thane had never been gifted with psychic abilities, but under her guidance, he found himself sharing memories he'd buried under years of pain. His first sight of the stars from a transport ship's viewport, the weight of command during impossible battles, the loneliness of the past for years, and the spark of hope that had ignited the moment she'd said his name. When their minds touched, the connection was electric. He felt her joy at finally finding him, her sorrow for the years he'd suffered alone, and beneath it all, a love so pure and powerful it seemed to rewrite the very fabric of his being. "Villani," he breathed, and her name on his lips was a prayer, a promise, a homecoming. Their second kiss was nothing like the gentle recognition of before. This was fire and starlight, passion that had been building across light years and lifetimes, finally finding its expression. Her hands tangled in his hair as he pulled her closer, their bodies fitting together with the inevitability of celestial mechanics. She was beautiful beyond description, curves and valleys that seemed designed by artists who understood the mathematics of desire. Her skin held that subtle luminescence even in passion, the silver markings glowing brighter as her arousal peaked. When he whispered words of love and wonder against her throat, she arched beneath him with sounds that were music given voice. Their lovemaking was a conversation in a language older than words. Every touch was both question and answer, every caress a promise written in flesh and starlight. When they finally joined, it was with a completion that transcended the physical, two souls recognizing their other half across the vast emptiness of space. Afterward, as they lay entwined in the afterglow, Villani traced patterns on his chest that matched the markings on her own skin. "The final ritual," she murmured, "is the claiming where two beings pledge their lives and futures to each other before their gods and people." Thane's heart clenched with sudden fear. "Your people, they'll accept a human?" Villani's expression grew troubled, and for the first time since her arrival, he saw uncertainty in her eyes. "There are factions on Kythera Secundus who question my mission. Some believe the Guardian was meant to remain legend, not become complicated reality." Before he could respond, her communication device chimed with an urgent message. As she read it, her face went pale, the silver markings dimming with distress. "What is it?" Thane asked. Sitting up, "The High Council demands my immediate return," she whispered. "They're threatening to strip me of my royal status for consorting with aliens and abandoning my duties for personal desires." Thane felt the familiar weight of abandonment settling over him. But this time it was different. This time he had something worth fighting for. "Then we go together," he said, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded fleets. "It's time the Guardian returned to his people." The journey to Kythera Secundus took 8 days through hyperspace, during which Thane marveled at the technological artistry of Villani's people. Her ship, the Star Whisperer, was less a vessel than a living extension of its pilot walls that shifted color with her moods, controls that responded to thought as much as touch, and corridors that seemed to breathe with organic rhythm. But more wondrous than any technology was watching Vellani in her element, moving through her ship with the fluid grace of someone born among the stars. "Tell me what I'm walking into," Thane said as they dropped out of hyperspace above a world that stole his breath. Kythera Secundus hung before them like a sapphire wrapped in silver clouds, its surface a harmony of crystalline cities and vast forests that seemed to glow from within. Vellani's expression was tense as she guided them toward the orbital platform that served as the system's capital. "The Kytherian High Council consists of 7 members representing our major houses. 3 support our union. They see you as the fulfillment of prophecy. 3 oppose it, believing humans are too primitive for royal consideration. The deciding vote belongs to High Councillor Zethran, who has remained neutral, but..." She hesitated. "He knew my mother. If he thinks I'm being led astray by emotion rather than wisdom, he could vote against us." The platform was a marvel of crystal and metal, its spires reaching toward the stars while its roots extended deep into space itself. As they docked, Thane could see crowds gathering, some carrying banners with his idealized image, others holding symbols he didn't recognize, but which Vellani identified as signs of protest. "Guardian Korik," said the being who met them at the airlock, tall and dignified with the bearing of a career diplomat. "I am Consul Varian. The High Council awaits your presence." The council chamber was a vast sphere of living crystal that amplified every sound into haunting harmonies. The 7 councillors sat on thrones that seemed grown rather than built, their forms imposing even by Kytherian standards. At their center sat High Councillor Zethran, ancient even by his people's standards, his silver markings so complex they resembled circuit patterns, etched in starlight. "So," Zethran's voice resonated through the chamber, "the legendary guardian stands before us in flesh rather than memory. Tell us, human, do you seek to claim Princess Vellani as trophy for your past deeds?" Thane stepped forward, drawing on decades of military bearing. "With respect, High Councillor, I seek nothing. Princess Vellani found me dying in exile, forgotten by my own people. She gave me back my life, my purpose, and my hope. If anyone is claiming a trophy, it's she who has claimed my heart." Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. One of the opposing councillors leaned forward. "Pretty words, but what have you done for us lately, Guardian? Your great deed is 25 years past. What value do you bring to our future?" Before Thane could answer, alerts began sounding throughout the chamber. Consul Varian appeared at Zethran's side, whispering urgently. The High Councillor's expression grew grim. "It seems we have more immediate concerns," Zethran announced. "Long-range sensors detect a hegemony battle fleet approaching our system. They demand we surrender our defensive platforms and submit to protective custody." The chamber erupted in concerned voices. The hegemony was a militant alliance that had been expanding aggressively through this sector, absorbing weaker civilizations through diplomacy or force. Thane felt his military instincts sharpening as he processed the tactical situation. "How long until they arrive?" he asked, his voice cutting through the chaos. 18 hours. Varian replied. Thane turned to address the full council. "Your orbital platforms, are they armed?" "Defensive systems only," one councillor replied. "We are a peaceful people, and your fleet, exploration vessels mostly. We have perhaps a dozen ships capable of combat, but they're scattered across the system." Thane closed his eyes, his mind automatically calculating fleet movements, defensive positions, and tactical advantages. When he opened them again, he was no longer a broken exile, but the decorated commander who had once held impossible odds. "I can give you victory," he said simply, "but I'll need complete authority over your defensive systems and the trust of your ship commanders." The next 18 hours blurred together in a symphony of controlled chaos. Thane worked tirelessly. Why? Alongside Kytherian engineers, adapting their defensive platforms into a coordinated network that could punch far above its weight. He coordinated with scattered ship captains, positioning them for maximum tactical advantage. Most importantly, he drew on 25 years of military evolution, applying strategies the hegemony wouldn't expect from a primitive civilization. When the battle came, it was swift and decisive. The hegemony fleet found themselves trapped in a web of overlapping fire zones. their superior firepower negated by superior positioning. Within 3 hours, they were in full retreat, leaving behind only wreckage and a system-wide broadcast of surrender. In the aftermath, as Thane coordinated cleanup efforts and ensured the wounded received care, he found High Counselors Ethern watching him with new respect. "You have given us victory and proven your worth beyond any ancient deed," the elder said formally. "But more than that, you have shown why Princess Vellani chose wisely. A true guardian protects not just the past, but the future." The council vote was unanimous. 3 days later, under the light of Kithra Secundus's twin sons, Commander Thane, Korak, and Princess Vellani were joined in a ceremony that blended human military tradition with Kitharian soul-bonding rituals. As they exchanged vows in both languages, his rough Terran contrasting beautifully with her melodic Kitharian, Thane realized he had never truly been forgotten. He had simply been waiting for his real mission to begin. As they kissed under showers of crystal petals that chimed like distant bells, Thane felt the last of his old wounds finally heal. He was no longer the last guardian, abandoned and forgotten. He was the first guardian of a new age, protector not just of one people, but of the love that could bridge any distance between the stars. In Vellani's arms, surrounded by beings who had elevated him to legend and then welcomed him as family, Commander Thane Korak had finally found his way home. And in the vast darkness of space, two civilizations looked toward a future bright with the promise of unity, protected by a love that had proven stronger than time, distance, and the endless night between worlds.